All right, I think we should get started. Well, hello everyone. I appreciate you all attending today. So my name is Brody Sumner. I am the Business Development Manager for Heartland Reverse Mortgages. Yeah, I really appreciate you guys all attending today. Today I'll be running a webinar on aged care in Australia. And I hope it provides some value to you. I hope it provides you with a better understanding of the current state of aged care in Australia, which hopefully in turn will allow you to assist your senior customers more effectively, addressing their needs. And you will also be provided with a potential solution to their residential and home care requirements, being the Heartland Reverse Mortgage. Okay. Let's jump into the agenda for today. So for the agenda today, I will be running through first the current state of aged care in Australia. We'll be looking at a few stats in regards to the aging population in Australia and general government expenditure on aged care as well. We'll go through the types of aged care within Australia, more specifically residential aged care and home care. And then I will provide the Heartland solution for each of these aged care, and also provide a couple of case studies to assist with your understanding. And of course, I'll leave some questions towards the end. So there is a chat box there. You guys can enter in your questions. I'll be happy to address them at the end. If you can keep them relevant to the webinar, that'd be great. But if you guys have any other questions that may be unrelated to this webinar, feel free to give me a call at the end. I'll have the contact details then. And just as a disclaimer, Heartland is the credit provider solely in any aged care transaction. We do not provide financial advice or credit assistance. So customers should ensure they are receiving appropriate advice from Centrelink and their broker, advisor, planner, and accountant to support their loan selection and aged care needs. This is important because really today we'll be providing a high-level summary of the services and products available that may only be suitable for some. Anyway, let's jump right into it. So for aged care in Australia, as you may know, Australians are living longer than ever before. And in fact, so we have obviously a growing aging population, and this is shown by this graph right here. So for those that are 65 years and older in Australia, population of 4.1 million in 2020. Now this is projected to increase to 5.4 million by 2030. But the important demographic there is those that are 85 years and older. So in 2020 at 517,000, that's projected to increase to 719,000 by 2030. So this is really around the age that's close to the average age of admission into aged care, which is just those figures there, 82 years for a male and 84.8 years for a female. But both residential and home care, it can be very expensive, and the Australian government have understood that there is this current need that is only going to increase going into the future. So the Australian government have therefore allocated $21.2 billion on aged care in 2019 to 2020. And overall, there were 1.3 million consumers of aged care in Australia over this period. And it is also expected that government expenditure on aged care will increase by 4% each year, corrected for inflation. But looking at this pie graph right here, really just shows the allocation of aged care. So majority does go through to residential care, with the rest going towards home care and basic support between $3.4 billion and $3.3 billion each. It's also important to note that even though majority of the funds that are spent are allocated for residential care, 2/3 of consumers of aged care are actually within their homes and are not actually in aged care. I just think this is an important point to note, as I'll be speaking about home care a little bit later on. So while the government is spending plenty on aged care, it may not be able to account for everyone's needs. So with the inevitable financing solutions being required as we move into the future, the Heartland Reverse Mortgage may be a viable solution for your customer, but I will be discussing this later on in the presentation. All right. I was going to give a good summary of the types of aged care in Australia. So today we'll be really talking about residential aged care and home care. So residential aged care is where it's the type of care that supports people who can no longer live at home and need ongoing help with everyday tasks or healthcare. Home care supports people who want to remain living independently in their homes for as long as possible. So these are two we'll be speaking about mostly today, but there are other means of aged care as well, such as flexible and short-term care, which I won't necessarily be touching on so much today. But this is for those people who require care in alternative ways to the above, such as transition care, which is it's like short-term care after a hospital stay, usually up to 12 weeks, and also short-term restorative care, and of course the National and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Flexible Aged Care Program, which is mainly funded in rural and remote areas, which was made to provide, designed to provide culturally appropriate residential and aged care services that are close to these types of communities. But now let's just jump into residential aged care. So residential aged care, who is it for? Well, it's for seniors who can no longer live at home and may require round-the-clock clinical care and accommodation in an external facility that is not their home, and they need ongoing supervision and assistance with everyday tasks or health care. And it's needed because a senior may have been diagnosed with a medical condition, commonly can be dementia, Alzheimer's, or maybe a cardiovascular disease. They may have reduced mobility. So, obviously access issues can be a challenge for some seniors. So residential aged care can provide ramps and rails and other means of access to ensure seniors can move a bit more freely. Also, they may have had a recent fall or a recent hospital admission that require further care after this. And of course, if they had a change in family care arrangements. And generally the services that they provide come under, day-to-day tasks such as cleaning, cooking, laundry, personal care like bathing and dressing. They have access to health practitioner services like nurses, clinical care and therapies, and of course other services as well, such as social and emotional support, and even entertainment as well. So yeah, for residential aged care, the overall aim is to ensure that senior Australians can maintain their overall health and well-being. However, it is generally very expensive, which I'll now speak about on the next slide. So residential aged care fees. So the fees for residential aged care are usually made up of three parts, sometimes four if there is additional service fees that they require. But usually the accommodation payment is, well, that's the very expensive part. So the accommodation payment is a payment for an individual's accommodation in an aged care home or facility. And it can be subsidized by the government based on an individual means assessment test. So they look at obviously your income and assets. I will speak about this in the next slide. But it can be paid in two different ways. First being the lump sum, which is paid right at the start of accommodation. And this is what is called a refundable accommodation deposit, or the RAD. And this is usually what is very expensive. So they can range between $50,000 right up to $2 million. And in my experience with reverse mortgages, I actually see them to be around $500,000 to $600,000 as well. A lot of the time, it's not ideal. The seniors, they really don't have a means to pay for this refundable accommodation deposit unless they have to sell their home, which obviously is not an ideal situation. that usually want to hold on to their homes that they have worked for all their lives. So there is the other alternative, which is the daily fee or the daily accommodation payment, or the DAP. So I'll be calling them RAD and DAP as well, just in case you get confused. So the DAP is like paying rent, and usually averages around $75 per day. So they are it's like the RAD converted into a daily fee with additional interest costs as well. You can see the calculation up top there. The refundable accommodation deposit times the maximum permissible interest rate. So the maximum permissible interest rate is the government set interest rate, which calculates the daily accommodation payment based on an agreed room price. And it basically determines equivalence between a daily payment and a refundable lump sum deposit, which gives you a choice on how you can make your payment. But the general trend these days, as I was saying, is more people will pay for the debt rather than the refundable accommodation deposit, as they don't have the means to fund a large sum for the RAD. And other thing to note, obviously, the refundable accommodation deposit is refundable at the end of the term, but the daily accommodation payment is not. And you can also pay a combination of both. So sometimes someone might pay partially for the refundable accommodation deposit, and this can mean that they can have a deduction of the daily accommodation payment as they've made that RAD partial payment. So that's the first bit. And then on top of this, there's also a basic daily fee, which is for all those who receive residential aged care. And this covers daily living costs such as meals, power, and laundry. And the basic fee is basically 85% of the single person rate of basic age pension, which is currently $952.70. So yeah, that's usually can be covered by pension. But on top of this, there may be a means tested care fee that is sometimes that is not payable by everyone. It is dependent on it is dependent on the individual means assessment test that is completed by Centrelink, looking at their income and assets. So it's basically an extra contribution, and it's paid, obviously paid in addition to the basic fee. And it also goes towards the cost of personal and clinical care. So those are really the general fees that always come with any kind of residential aged care. But on top of this, there may be a additional or extra service fee as well. And this is for those individuals wanting a higher standard of accommodation, or they want to pay for additional services such as paid TV or regular visits from the hairdresser. So the additional or extra service fee may be required based on each senior's individual needs. Obviously, they differ from senior to senior by quite a bit. And so this, along with the accommodation payment, may be covered by using financing solutions, such as the Heartland Reverse Mortgage. And also, a good place to look for information is this website down below, My Aged Care. It's the government website. It's basically got all you require in relating to aged care. So, residential aged care, I was speaking about the government assistance that they can provide for the accommodation costs. So seniors moving into a residential aged care facility are usually expected to pay for their accommodation fees if they can afford it. However, assistance is available to those that do need it, which can be paid, which can be subsidised, paid partly or in full by the Australian government. And that's fully, this is usually determined after the income and assets test has been completed with Centrelink. And if it is partly subsidised, the RAD and the DAP will then be you'll actually then start paying what's called the refundable accommodation contribution or the daily accommodation contribution, which is slightly, but that is basically a subsidized payment that you will make. When you are paying the RAC or the DAC, it usually comes under, will come between these asset thresholds. So for a general guide for a single person, if income is determined to be below $28,048 and assets below $51,000, the Australian government will pay the accommodation costs. However, if income is above $70,000, $775, or assets are above $173,000, it is required to pay for the full cost of accommodation, negotiated and agreed to with the aged care home. So really, the RAC and the DAC are they are subsidized between these thresholds, basically. So yeah, and now we'll talk about the Heartland solution to residential aged care. So Heartland can assist those who wish to move into, or who are already in aged care or are looking to move into aged care. And we can do this through our aged care loan product. It's just like the reverse mortgage. However, there are some different, some slightly different characteristics. So, for example, there is a maximum 5-year loan term for the aged care loan. However, this can be extended on review. So if your customer is, say that they are still within aged care at the end of 5 years, we can look at running through another assessment, carry out another valuation and extend that term by another 5 years. With this, our aged care loan has an additional 5% to the standard LVR. So I guess a good way to understand that, for our standard LVR, the quick way to work it out is the age minus 45. But for an aged care loan, the LVR is calculated age minus 40. That'll give you the LVR. And this can be applied to be used for an owner-occupied home or a secondary property loan. And for a secondary property, 10% scaling would usually apply. Standard reverse mortgage would be 25% scaling, but for aged care loan, it's only 10%. The loan will be repayable 5 years after the commencement date, or if earlier, 12 months after the passing of the last nominated borrower from their estate. And also, not to confuse things, so say if the borrower passed away at 4 years and 2 months, the loan would be required to be paid still at year 5. It's just to, I guess, illustrate that. So say, for example, if we had a 75-year-old, for a 75-year-old, for a standard reverse mortgage, the LVR we would provide would be 30%, as I mentioned before, so age minus 45. But for an aged care product, it would be age minus 40. Therefore, a 75-year-old would be eligible for a 35% LVR for the aged care loan product. But for the purpose of the loan, it can be used to fund the refundable accommodation deposit, or the RAD, or the refundable accommodation contribution, RAD and RAC, or the DAP, daily accommodation payment. But it can also be used for home improvements, debt consolidation as well, or any other needs that may be required. In the drawdown types, we have flexible drawdown options, which I will speak about later. But for a brief summary, we have the initial advance which is just like a lump sum, which can be used for the refundable accommodation deposit or the refundable accommodation contribution. A regular advance facility for the daily accommodation payment and contribution can be also used for a cash reserve for future expenses when required, or a combination of all three, of course. All right, now let's move on over to home care. So for home care, who is it for? So this is for Australians who wish to age in place and remain living independently in their own homes as long as possible. This is really to cater to those who want to hold on to their homes in their later years, because recent studies that were shown by RMIT University that 90% of seniors do wish to age in place throughout their retirement years. So this is most definitely a preference among this demographic. On top of this as well, I thought was important to mention, the Royal Commission brought out a review on aged care recently, and one of the recommendations was to adjust the definition of aged care to be for the support and care for people to maintain their independence as they age. And I think home care is a big part of that. It helps ensure seniors can maintain their independence within the bounds of their own homes. So yeah, I guess I'm a big proponent for home care. But so how does it work? So there are coordinated packages of service and care. They're provided by the government-approved providers and basically allow an individual to live independently. And to illustrate the importance of home care today, the government have, or at least in October 2020, they allocated a further $1.6 billion to create an extra 23,000 home care packages in response to increasing demand. And they also do have a significant waiting list, so it's really to ease that. In addition to a further 6,105 packages that were announced in July 2020. And that's coming straight from the budget that was released last year. So the home care package. So home care services help other Australians stay well, independent, connected and safe. And the services that they provide come under this bunch here. So we have personal care, which is just for like bathing, showering, clothing, nursing care, therapy, and allied health. So allied health are those health professionals that are not part of the medical, dental, or nursing professions. Includes like access to like audiologists, chiropractors, dietitians, occupational therapy, exercise, etc. So that's one big part of it. Home maintenance and cleaning within the home, and of course assistive technology as well. So provision for scooters, walkers, canes, and crutches. Also, they provide a means of transport and also social support. I thought it should be important to mention though, home care packages usually do not include a subsidy for items purchased out of general income. So anyway, how does it work? So basically the senior will need to choose a service and a provider using the provider tool. We'll come up with a number of providers maybe near their location, and then the government would then, after carrying out the means test and whatnot, the government will pay the provider a subsidy, and any out-of-pocket fees will need to be covered by the person receiving care. So there can still be out-of-pocket fees. There might be additional services that they do require that are not covered under home care packages. And then the care will then be provided within their own home. Once again, there's more information at that My Aged Care website. There's plenty of info there if you need reference. So for home care eligibility and process, for a home care package, this is the process that must be carried out initially. So a health assessment is conducted by an aged care assessment team, and yeah, usually they bring out an asset test based on income and assets, as mentioned, but yeah, also a health assessment as well. And then from there, they will be able to determine what package that they do require to basically address their needs. So there are package levels from level 1, which is basic care, up to level 4, which is high level care. Level 1 is just basic care needs. It's usually about $90,000 per year, but going up to level 4, high care needs usually approximately around $52,000 a year. So if they're eligible, the Australian government will subsidise the fee that is payable to the provider based on the asset test. And then basic daily fees and income tested care fees will be paid directly to the provider who provides the services. I'll speak about that next. But yeah, once again, this may not be able to cover all fees. Any out-of-pocket fees are to be covered by the person receiving care, and then that care will be provided to the individual in their own home. So home care costs and fees, they're quite similar to the residential aged care. So there's a basic daily fee that once again applies to all the individuals that are seeking care at home. That's paid directly to the care provider, and it is adjusted in March and September each year, which is set by the Australian government, as it is based on a percentage of the single age pension. Once again, you can see the daily fee by package down below there as well. For the income tested care fee, this is obviously different for everyone. It's an additional contribution that some people pay if their income, say, is over the maximum income for a pensioner. And it's based on the income and assets and determined by the asset test once again, and paid on top of the basic daily fee. Obviously, there once again can be additional fees, maybe higher quality of care may be provided to those that need it. So, you know, once again, there may be requirement for financing solutions in this case. But now let's run through the Heartland solution to home care. So what we would use for home care is just the standard reverse mortgage, where customers can release equity from their home to basically fund the costs of home care. And also, additionally, they can draw down for other uses as well, dependent on the LVR and eligibility, to complete some home renovations, fund medical care costs, and fund other acceptable uses. So it is available for all those, for those that do wish to age in place in their own homes and receive care at home. And a second residential property can also be used as security as well, subject to credit criteria and loan conditions. So yeah, we can obviously use the owner-occupied property and a second residential property, which would go under a secondary property loan. In that case, we would scale the maximum by 25%. It's just important to note as well, for an aged care option, if one customer is in aged care and the other is in their home, only a standard reverse mortgage can be used. So basically, all the borrowers will need to be in aged care for an aged care loan to be taken out. Otherwise, if it's, say, one, yeah, if one is only in the home and the other is in the owner occupier, then it just comes under a standard reverse mortgage. But even with all the subsidies to refundable accommodation deposit, daily accommodation payment, home care packages, and government provisions, aged care, both residential or home care, can be obviously very expensive to fund. So there are out-of-pocket costs that customers may need additional funding with, as I've mentioned, and then that's where Heartland can assist, basically. All right. Before we jump into the case studies, I thought it'd just be important to touch on the flexible drawdown options to suit your customers' needs. So Heartland does encourage customers to only borrow what is needed. We want to make sure that we have flexible drawdown options. We have loan features that can attend to each customer's individual needs, and with these drawdown options, it will allow for that. So we have an initial advance, which is just like an initial lump sum amount paid at settlement, and that can be used for the lump sum for the refundable accommodation deposit or contribution, debt consolidation, and home improvements, but it can be also used for a number of other purposes as well, obviously subject to assessment. And we have regular advances, which supplement a retirement income with monthly, quarterly, and annual payments, which can go up to 10 years. Basically supplements a regular income and it can be used to pay for the daily accommodation payments or home care providers that do require that ongoing payment, or it can be to supplement pension payments to cover cash flow needs or bills. So there's obviously general living expenses. Sometimes regular advance will be required to pay for those ongoing living expenses, and also for a cash reserve facility. This enables customers to set aside funds for future needs or unexpected expenditure. So cash reserve facility is basically like a line of credit. Funds sit within an account and only accrue interest when those funds have been drawn. This can be drawn at any time, however, but it is subject to approval. Little note at the bottom there as well, new feature of the loan is I think it's important. For the purposes of home care, we will waive our minimum $5,000 initial advance requirement. So usually we do require $5,000 to be taken out on initial advance, but in the circumstance of home care, we'll be happy to waive that. All right, let's go on to our case study. All right, so we have Bruce, who is 83 years old, and he needs to move into an aged care facility. He has a health condition and does require care that is required outside of his home. So he's chosen today to pay the daily accommodation payment of the debt and requires funds for this purpose to complete some minor home modifications and ongoing medical care costs. He has an unencumbered investment home, so on top of his own occupier, he does have this investment property that he prefers to use as security. It's based in the Mornington Peninsula, valued at $1.3 million, and in this case, as I mentioned earlier, we will only scale the max lend by 10% for an investment property when it is on an aged care loan. So the total loan amounts required by Bruce is only $304,980. He needs $5,000 for upfront for minor home modifications, almost $200,000 for a regular advance for ongoing aged care costs, which amounts to $3,333 per month for 5 years, and $100,000 cash reserve for any unexpected future expenses such as medical care costs and general living expenses. So obviously Heartland can provide a solution to this. First, we need to determine what the funds available are. So the maximum lending amount calculated is based on the borrower's age. So it's always based on the youngest borrower's age. In this case, there is only one borrower, and the value of the property. So in this case, it is 43%. Would be age minus 40 in this case. So the max limit we can provide for standard, so the max limit we can provide these, we've worked out to be $559,000 here. We need to reduce that lend by 10% as a secondary home, and that amounts to $503,100. However, this is fine because Bruce only needs to take out what he requires, which is only $304,000 and not. So for the funding solution, which is based on the customer's needs, you take out initial advance of $5,000 for minor home improvements. Regular advance facility, $199,980. As I mentioned, $3,333 per month over 5 years. And that's really used to pay those ongoing daily accommodation payments that I spoke a bit earlier about today, and set the payment frequency to once a month, which is when those payments are usually required to be made. And then there'll be a cash reserve facility set up of $100,000, which is set up for any unexpected circumstances that may occur considering the borrower's health condition. No interest is charged until the funds have been drawn. So that's important to note. For both regular advance facility and a cash reserve facility, the interest is only accruing on what has been drawn. For Case study number 2. So we have Ruth, who is 86 years old and wants to remain in her own home. However, she requires home care and needs funds to pay for these ongoing costs. This time, Ruth is going to be using an unencumbered owner-occupied home in the Northern Beaches in Sydney, and it's valued at $1.7 million. Overall, she does seek a loan amount of $697,000. In this case, she only requires funds for those ongoing home care costs. So basically a regular advance of $4,700 per month over 7 years, and on top of that, a $303,000 cash reserve for any other unexpected future living costs and medical expenses. So for the solution for this one, we need to determine what the LBR is. So maximum lending calculator is based on the borrower's age. So it's age minus 45, which comes to 41%. Apply that to the property value, and that'll give you your amount. So she is basically maxing out her loan in this case. There'll be a minimum initial advance requirement of $5,000 is waived, as I mentioned earlier, as the purpose is for home care. So really the first payment is going to be that $4,700 required for home care. So the funding will be used just for the regular advance facility of $395,000, which is $4,700 per month over 7 years. And they require the regular advance facility to pay the home care services provided on a monthly basis over 7 years. For a cash reserve facility as well, they set that up for $303,000 only. To set that up as they do require it. They set that up for unexpected circumstances that may occur in the future relating to medical expenses or unforeseen living expenses. And once again, no interest is charged until those funds have been drawn. All right, well, we pretty much got to the end. I'll just run through a quick summary of everything I've spoken about today. So for residential aged care, this is for those no longer able to age at home. They need an external facility for round-the-clock care. There are the fees payable. I spoke about the refundable accommodation deposit, the daily accommodation payment, basic daily fee, and the means-tested care fee, and of course, any other additional service fee. Out-of-pocket fees will need to be covered by the individual. However, there is government assistance available, which will be based on the assets test, looking at their income, looking at their assets. And in that case, they may need to pay a daily accommodation contribution or a refundable accommodation contribution. So Heartland aged care option can be used to pay for aged care fees and out-of-pocket costs, plus home improvements, medical care, and other purposes. So for home care, this is for those who wish to age in place, remain living independently in their own homes for as long as possible, and care is provided within their own homes. The package level of care will need to be determined by the aged care assessment team. And basically an asset and means test will also need to be conducted by Centrelink too. The fee is paid directly to the care provider, and any of out-of-pocket fees need to be covered by the individual. Fees payable, basic daily fee, and income tested care fee, and Heartland Standard Reverse Mortgage will be used in this case as a potential solution for home care. And once again, they can cover out-of-pocket costs and home improvements, which may be required for the senior to age comfortably in place. And once again, any more info that you might require, you probably could find it on the My Aged Care website down below, relating to home care, aged care, what fees are payable, etc. So yeah, and now I am going to leave. I'll give you a minute if you guys want to write any questions or anything, and I'll be happy to answer. Cheers. Okay, I've just got a question from Suzanne. Will these slides be available later? Yep, I will. I'll be happy to provide these slides to you. I'll make sure I actually send them out with an invite. Sorry, not an invite. Actually, no, the slides won't be available. It'll be placed on YouTube, the overall webinar. But if you want, Suzanne, I can email you the PDF for the slides. Okay, so Mike here. Okay, so Mike here has asked, can you go through a scenario with someone in home care who then transitions into aged care facility? So that's an interesting question. So basically, in that case, for home care, if they were in home care and they need to transition into aged care, that loan would then need to be basically, we would need to start a new aged care loan if they are moving into an aged care facility. We'd have to carry out a new assessment, a new valuation, and basically treat it like a separate loan. So yeah, I'll be happy to go through that with you a bit more, Mike. I'll give you a call. Okay. Okay, get another question. Does the broker receive trail only on the value of the funds drawn down? I will discuss. I'll be happy to discuss anything to do with commissions on the phone. We won't do it here today, but if you can leave your email address because it comes under anonymous, I'll be happy to give you a call to discuss the commission options. Cheers. And yes, Mike, I'll be happy to email the slides to you. No worries. Cool. So any more questions? You can fire away, but otherwise we can wrap things up. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you everyone for attending. I hope you managed to take something away from today. Yeah. And by the way, before I move forward, here's my contact details as well. We've got a new support person on board. It's Clement. He is our broker support, or broker analyst. He'll be able to answer any queries you may have through the support line or the email address there. Or you can give me a call directly. That's my number. Or send an email through. That's fine. And if you guys do have any applications you want to send through, feel free to send it through to the applications inbox just there. But yeah, as I said, hope you guys managed to take something away today. And yeah, really enjoy your day. Thank you for attending. Cheers.